Hello and welcome to the Blue Open Studio tutorial video series. The topic of this video will be thin client connectivity. In this video, we will be discussing thin client concepts, the thin client solutions in the software, and the software's thin client connection architecture. And then we'll demonstrate how to configure the application for thin client access, how to configure the host computer for thin client access, how to configure the remote computer for secure viewer connection, and how to configure the remote device for a Studio Mobile Access connection. Blue Open Studio is built on a server-client architecture, and that can support both thick clients and thin clients. The choice of the type of client depends on your system requirements. A thick client is a computer that performs most, if not all, of the processing activity during project runtime. It has sufficient processing power, memory, and graphics to run the complete project file, and it only exchanges data, which would be something like a function synchronization and tag value changes, with the project runtime server as needed. A project runtime server could also be a thick client to another server. In Blue Open Studio, thick clients are handled through remote management. We've discussed remote management in a previous video, so please refer to that for more information. However, a thick client essentially is just another PC running an instance of the application. A thin client is a computer that depends primarily on the project runtime server for processing. It only needs to have a network connection to get screens and data from the server, and a web browser to display the screens to the user. Blue Open Studio allows you to create screens that can be viewed on a remote station in a regular web browser. The station where the user can view the screens is called the thin client. The actual Blue Open Studio software is installed only on the server station. All project files, the tags database, screen files, and task worksheets are stored on the server, and all background and communication tasks are executed on the server. The thin client simply loads your project's graphical interface, which would be the screens containing the objects and animation as needed, and then uses that interface to represent data, which would be tag values on the server. You do not need to install the Blue Open Studio development application or any of the project files on the thin client. This solution provides a high level of flexibility because any computer that has a network connection to the server station via TCP/IP can access the project during runtime. And for thin clients, we have two possible solutions. The first is the Secure Viewer Thin Client, which is a standalone executable that you install on the remote station. So this has to be a PC where this application can be installed. The platform is Windows only at this point. The host is the Secure Viewer executable, and the technology it's built on is ActiveX. Now this is a secure viewer, meaning that it is intended for local network or intranet access. However, you can configure it to tunnel or use a VPN in order to get access from the outside world. And the second option is Studio Mobile Access or SMA thin clients. These are platform agnostic, meaning they can run on any operating system and can use any browser as long as the browser supports HTML5. So this is a much more flexible, much more mobile thin client that can be used. For a visualization of how thin clients connect, we have in front of us here the application server where the Blue Open Studio application is running. We can connect over TCP/IP over Secure Viewer to another station, or use Secure Viewer on a separate HMI, or we can use Studio Mobile Access, which supports HTML5 on a desktop PC, or over wireless to any mobile or smart device. And all of these clients can be connected simultaneously to the application server, provided that the license installed on the application server will support that many simultaneous connections. So we are currently viewing the desktop of one of our PS5000 series industrial PCs, and we will be using this industrial PC as the application server for our test. So the first thing I will do is I will open Blue Open Studio. Once that opens, you'll see that I have the PC demo application loaded. This will be the one that we'll be using for this test. And what we have to do first is we have to make sure that the application is able to be served up so the thin clients can connect to it. And to do that, we have to publish the application as HTML pages. So to do that, we go to the application menu, we go to publish, and then we click on save all as HTML. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through and save all of our screens as HTML files. Now you'll see in the output window, you will get some messages usually about mobile access, and there'll be warning messages saying that on certain screens, certain features are not supported. What's happening is that when it's saving the screen off as HTML, it's just stripping those objects off of the screen when it saves them. The screens will still be able to be accessed through our thin clients, however, those objects will not be there. But if we do view the screens at runtime on the local station here, we will still see those objects, so they're only being removed from the HTML versions of the screens. So what I'll do now is I'll just go ahead and speed up the video so we can quickly get through the saving. So now it's completed saving the screens as HTML, and you see we have quite a few messages in the output window. Those are just objects that were stripped out. However, we don't see any actual errors, so we are all set. After that, the next thing you want to check is that the proper tasks are configured to run in your application. So I'll go up to my Home tab on the menu ribbon, click on Tasks under Local Management, and I will look. And what I want to make sure is enabled for automatic startup is Mobile Access Runtime and the TCP/IP Server Runtime. With those two enabled, we'll be able to connect either through Studio Mobile Access or through our Secure Viewer thin clients. And one other note, if you do change the screens through development here, say you have to add or remove something or maybe modify some text, you will have to save the screens again as HTML files. However, you don't have to save them all, because you can simply save the screen or the screen group that you have open as HTML. You don't have to go through and save the entire application. So once we have our proper tasks configured, the next thing we need to do is configure IIS. So I will come to my Start menu, and you can either browse to it through the control panel, or if you're on Windows 7 or later, you can simply search for IIS, and you'll bring up the Internet Information Services Manager. Now, when you first installed Blue Open Studio, if you had IIS installed, the thin client components will be installed when you install the software. If you did not have IIS installed, you can always add it in at a later time through your Windows programs and features, and then go back through the Blue Open Studio installer and select Modify, and then pick the Mobile Access or thin client component, and then it will update your installation. So once you have that component installed and IIS enabled, there are a few settings that we need to configure in here. The first is the physical path for the website. And to do that, we'll come up to this connection list here on the left-hand side, drop it down, we'll expand sites, and then we will not expand, but click on default website. And when we do that, we see that we get some new settings in the center area here under default website home. And then we see we have some new actions here on the right-hand side. So the first thing we want to do is configure the physical path. And to do that, we'll go under basic settings here under actions. And then we see the physical path here. And what we want to do is browse to the application directory where our program or our application's APP file is located. So I'll click browse, and I know mine is the default location where the PC demo app is installed. So that's under users, public documents, Blue Open Studio demo, and then PC demo. And I click OK, and you see now that the path has been updated. And now what we can do is we can click on test settings, and you see that the first one comes back green, that the pass-through authentication has been passed. but the second one is yellow. It cannot verify the access path to this. So what we recommend doing is that if you have a user configured in Windows for the PC that will be running the application, you can click Connect As and then set a specific user. And once we do that, when we click Test Settings, we now see both come back as green. However, this authorization here is not necessarily mandatory. However, if you have some issues connecting after you go through these steps, this will be the first one that we recommend, is that you set up a user that has proper access to the path. After we configure the physical path, the next thing we want to do is add in what are called MIME types. And MIME types are associations for file extensions that allow the default website to serve these type of extensions up. So we'll double click on MIME types and we'll come in and we see here a list, and there's 3 columns: extension, MIME type, and entry type. So we can group by either column, and the extensions are just file extensions. For example, we see here ART, ASF, and then we see, for example, the type for ASF is video/x-ms-asf, and it's inherited. What that means is that this came from another application, was registered in here. So there are 10 MIME types that we need to configure in here. If we group or sort by MIME type and we scroll down and we look for application/studio, some of them may be inherited. And in fact, when I installed the software and I selected the application directory for the physical path, it inherited the 10 that I need. And you'll see them here: .app, .gis, .ini, .lst, .scc, .scr, .sg, .stmp, .tra, and .trn. These are the 10 extensions that need to be added into MIME types. And the type for all of them is application/studio. If they're not there, we can simply come here to add, put in the extension, for example, .app, and then for MIME type, application/studio. And then click OK, and then we will add it in. Once we have the MIME types configured, to go back, click on the default website again under Connections, and we need to enable directory browsing. So we see directory browsing here. Now we'll double click to bring it up, and over here under Actions on the right hand side, we see right now that it's already enabled, but if it was disabled like it is here, we just simply click on Enable, and now directory browsing has been enabled for this physical path. And we can test that by, once we come back to the default website here, under Actions, we'll see Browse under Browse Website. If we click on that, it will bring up our default web browser, and it will show us the directory. In this case, we see here that we have our directory located here. And if we look, we know that this is the proper one because we see pcdemo.app. Close that and come back into IIS. Now that we have directory browsing enabled, what we have to do in order to apply these changes is restart the default website. So we can do that under Manage Website here on the right-hand side. And we just can simply click Restart. And we see that it went gray for a second and then came back as enabled. So now the website has been restarted. So those changes that we've made have been applied. The next thing that we need to do is we need to configure access through security for our application folder. So what I'm going to do is open Windows Explorer, and I'm going to browse to this application directory. And then once I see the PC demo application directory, I'm going to right click and go to Properties, and then I am going to go to Security. And we are going to add in 2 new users for security. So under Group or Username, I will click Edit. And then once the Permissions dialog comes up, I will click Add. Then I'll enter in the first user, which is I USR. And to verify that the syntax spelling is correct, I can click on check names here. And if it is correct, it'll come back underlined like that. If not, you'll get an additional dialog that asks you to browse for the user. So I know this is correct, so I'll click OK. And we see that is added in here under groups or usernames. What we want to do is we want to make sure that down here under permissions that we check full control. That will check everything except for special permissions, because we want to give full control for that user to this folder. And then I will click add again. And the second user will be IIS underscore IUSRS. And then I'll once again click check names. And you see that it comes back now with the computer name / the user. So we know that that's correct. I'll click OK. And once again under permissions, I will make sure that I click full control and that the boxes are checked with the exception of special permissions. Once I have those two users added in and configured, I will click apply. And then I will click OK. And then OK one more time to get out of the folder properties. We have now added in our folder security. So once I have done that, I can come back into IIS and once again restart the website. And anytime you make changes, be it to the folder security, to the location, so the physical path, or any other settings inside of the default website or IIS, it is recommended to restart the default website. Additionally, if you republish your screens, we recommend coming here and restarting the website as well. So now once we have configured IIS, we've published the application to be able to be served up for thin clients, and we've made sure that our tasks are configured correctly. I will start the runtime for the PC demo application. And when it comes up, you will see here on the home screen at the header, there will be this tablet icon at the top here. This is a shortcut to actually bring up our default web browser for a SMA connection. So if I click on it, it will bring up my web browser, and we see a tab with mobile access, and it is configured to pop right into the home screen. And you see here what the URL is if we're trying to connect locally. It gives us localhost / BOS 80, and then we've configured as a guest user, and then what screen or screen group to show. So then it comes up right here, and as you can see now, I can navigate through. It is a little slow to update, but I can click through the different screens. And I'm connected now via our Studio Mobile Access or SMA Thin client. So now we will connect to the runtime locally using Secure Viewer. And to do that, we first have to have Secure Viewer installed. And we will go over that here when we attempt to connect from a remote station. But on our PC here, I already have it installed, and we have to configure it first in order to connect. So what I will do is I will bring up my Start menu, and I will go to All Programs, and then Proface, and then Blue Open Studio. And inside of Blue Open Studio, we will see two items, Blue Open Studio Secure Viewer and Blue Open Studio Secure Viewer Configuration. So if I click on Configuration, it'll bring up a window here where I can configure the settings in order to connect to our application runtime. The first field here, we would put in our IP address, then our TCP port, and then the URL. So for us, our IP address is going to be localhost. If we were connecting remotely, we would have to put in the IP address here. And then the URL for us will actually browse to the application we want to view. So I will browse to where this application is located, which is users, public documents, Blue Open Studio demo, and then PC demo. And I want to pick the APP file, and then click open. And you see that the URL is pasted in here. If we were connecting remotely, we would put in the IP address and then slash the app file name. And then we have options if we want to enable a splash window or the progress bar. And then if we go under advanced, we can put in a secondary data server IP and a backup URL. That is in case the selected one on the original or first screen, if that application becomes unavailable or stops running, we can switch over to a secondary server. And so our thin clients do not lose connection or don't lose productivity. And then we can set up our date format, our switch timeout. If we want to log in as a default user, if we want to disable any commands, force remote behavior, and then if we go under web, we can put in an IP address, primary and secondary, and a TCP or SSL port for web tunneling. For this, I'm just going to leave everything set to default. And then once we configure everything, we click save. And now it has saved an INI file. So click OK, and then click close. And then I'll go back into my start menu, and then back into Proface, and then into Blue Open Studio. And this time I'll click on the Blue Open Studio Secure Viewer. And we see it comes up, and now we have a second instance. So if I switch between the two, you see here on my task switch, I have two Blue Open Studio runtimes running, and they are independent from one another. So if I were to say, come here to Industries, the original runtime or the second instance is on the home screen still. So now we will look at connecting to our application runtime from a remote PC. So I am now on our development PC here, which it will remotely connect back. And the first thing that I'll show is connecting via the SMA client. So what I've done is I've connected previously, and I've just made a shortcut on my desktop here. So I will double click on it to open. I'll maximize it, and as you can see, just like with the local connection, it comes up in a web browser. Only this time, instead of saying localhost, it has the IP address, but the rest of the URL is the same. With the PC demo, it provides a great example of how that URL needs to be structured. However, if I wanted to say not come to this screen or log in as this user, I can delete that. And then it'll come in with the mobile access login. So I can put in a user, which since there's no security enabled in the version that I'm running, I'll just simply put in guest and leave the password blank, and then click login. And then what it does, it brings me to a menu here. And this menu is created inside of the application. And we have three different groups: main, industries, and solutions. So what I can do here is, for example, under main, I can click on screens, and then it gives me a list here, for example, animations, and I click on that, and it'll bring up the animation screen. Now, to navigate out of this, we do not want to click the back arrow on our browser. We want to click on the back arrow right below it that says screens. If we click on the back arrow here, it'll actually kick us out of this URL. So if I keep clicking back here, I'll come back to the main list here, and then under industries, I'll click on screens, and then now I see a list of all the different ones. For example, I can come to machinery, can come back, go to wastewater, and come back. And then again, under solutions, it will see our three solutions here: PACML, OEE, or Andon. And then we can also come in, say, look at alarms. So if there are specific alarms for this group that are configured, you can come here and look at it. And then we can also look under process values. And you'll see here that we have several different values configured. And these are the labels for these values. For example, ramp up, wave up, on off, cosine, ramp down, and so on. And we can select inside of the software when we configure it in the application what type of display we want to use. Additionally, for trend, we can come here and we can look at available trends that are set up for this group, which once again are set up during the application configuration. Same thing holds true for industries and solutions. So if I keep clicking back here, you see now I'm at the main page and I can log off and it will bring me back to this prompt. If I were to click back here, you see that it takes me back to my original URL, which will bring me up into the screen. So as you can see, there are two different ways of accessing the screens. We can either select what screen to come to and optionally what user to log in as, or we can come to a prompt, which will then bring us to what's called the tabular or just a grid layout of the application. So now we will look at where we need to go inside of the development software in order to configure our application to serve up the screens we just saw through our SMA Thin client. So I have the PC demo app open, and what we'll do is on the menu ribbon here, we'll go to Project, and then we see under Web here, we have three options: Web, Mobile Access, and Mobile Access Tabular. So if we click on Mobile Access, it will come up with a configuration screen. And we see here under Main, then we have Industries and Solutions, and then we see an area here where we can configure our area settings, what trend and process values we want to look at, the widget sizes, the widget type, the pen color, and so on. So here we are listing the min and max values as well. So we're listing here not only for trending and process values, but also for possible alarms. And then also what screens we want to list under this group. And then under global settings, this is where we come to configure the alarm control and what we want to see for our alarm messages. And then also under web here, we have the option for auto screen scaling, which is extremely helpful because since this is through a web browser, it could be different screen resolutions. It could be one is connecting through a desktop PC, the other might be through a phone or a tablet. So enabling auto screen scaling is extremely helpful in order to keep everything kind of looking similar across different screen sizes. And then under our industries and solutions, we have the same type of setup here where we can configure what screens and any process and trend values and alarms we want to see. And then Mobile Access Tabular is actually for older devices. Think of BlackBerry phones and the essentially first generation of smart devices or mobile devices. And here what we do is when we enable this, we simply put in a tag and a description, and then what we see is essentially a tabular format of these tags and their values. So it's a very rudimentary view of the application. And then under web here is where we would come to say set up a data server IP address and configure some additional settings if we want to connect over a web browser. So now we will look at connecting to our remote application runtime via the Secure Viewer Thin client. And the first thing that we'll need to do on this PC is we'll need to install it. And there are a couple of different methods that we can go through to install it. The first is to browse to our website. So I'll go to Proface. So go to profaceamerica.com, support, and then downloads, updates and drivers, and then Blue Open Studio. And then we'll see the thin client setup for BOS, and in this case, it's version 8.0. We can click on that and then come here and then download the Blue Open Studio thin client setup. Additionally, we can find it in our program directory. So if I open up Windows Explorer and I navigate to where our program is installed, Program Files, Proface, Blue Open Studio 8.0, and then under Redist, Web Add-on, and then Thin Client, we see the Thin Client setup. So we can run this to install the Thin Client setup. The third option is if you do not have the software installed, but you have the installer, we can also find it inside of the installation files. So I have a copy, the zip file here on the desktop. So I will open it up. And what we can do is if we browse to disk and then program files and then redist and then web add-on and then thin client. We have the thin client setup.exe here. So we have our 3 different locations where we can find it. In this case, I'm just going to extract this out of the zip file, and then I will run the installer. And then it will come up and it will give me an option for what type of components to install. And in this case, I'm going to check all 4. So program files is mandatory. Secure viewer is in fact the shortcut if we want to create a shortcut on our desktop. PDF printing allows us to print from the secure viewer locally on our PC. And then the security system device driver is for additional connections and communication through the secure viewer. So I'll just check all of them and click next, and then it'll run and install the software, and I'll speed up the video here so we don't have to wait for it. Once it's done, I will click finish, and then what I will do is I will open the configuration like I did on the local machine. So I'll come to Start, All Programs, Proface, Blue Open Studio 8.0, and we see here that we have our secure viewer and our secure viewer configuration. So click on Configuration. It comes up with the same dialog that we've seen previously. So instead of localhost now, since I'm connecting remotely, I will enter in the IP address. And then for the URL, I will enter in http:// and those are forward slashes. And then the IP address, and then // and then the app file name and extension. So pcdemo.app, and then we'll click Save. And you've noticed this message twice now where it says that this file has been saved successfully. So if we were to open that directory, which was C, Program Files, Proface, then the Blue Open Studio Thin Client 8.0, if we look, we'll find a viewer.ini file. And if I open that in a text editor, we see here the configuration. So what we could do is we can configure this either manually through here or through our dialog, and then we can also copy this file and then give it to another station and load it there. And then now we have our configuration already set, and then we can automatically connect without having to go through the configurator. So what I'll do here is I'll click OK, then I'll close this, and I will once again go through my Start menu. And then this time I'll open Secure Viewer. And you see now that we've been able to connect to our remote application, and we can browse through the different screens like we could locally with the Secure Viewer. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact Proface America Technical Support by phone at 1-800-289-9266, option 2, or by email, support@profaceamerica.com. You can also visit our website, profaceamerica.com, for drivers, manuals, FAQs, and other product and software information. Thanks again, and have a great day.